in the soul, when new wants are unfolded in multitudes, and a new and undefined good is thirsted for. There are periods when to dare is the highest wisdom. So ends the reading.
Thank you, Reverend Ickman. As a caring community, we set aside time to share the joys and concerns of our lives by speaking briefly from the heart. This is a time to honor the common humanity and sacred spirit within each of us. If you have a joy you would like to share, or a burden that might be eased by sharing in community, you are invited to do so. Please raise your hand to be recognized by the host, or write your joy or concern in chat. Nathan?
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, I'll look for any hands for joys or concerns. I guess I could kick us off. I have a joy this last week that comes in the shape of community. I've felt an outpouring of community towards my family, my mom, as she's dealing with health complications, as I've mentioned. Vicky and Ted showed up to our house and brought smush, which is a family recipe. It's been well loved at this house, and it's brought a lot of love. And we also have flowers from Vicky's garden to sit in my mom's room. So, and various other outpourings of community from my work and several volunteer involvements that I have gotten involved in, and it's just been really really helpful. So thank you all for being my community. And Julie, I see you. I think you might need to unmute.
There, I think I'm on. Anyway, my sister has 2 dogs, one of whom is a puppy and the other one is about 15 and a half. And a few months ago, that 15-and-a-half-year-old dog had a mate, and that mate passed away. And today they're having to put down the other little dog. And so my heart goes out to my sister and her husband. These dogs are basically their children. And it's going to be a hard day for her, hard week. And I'm holding her in the light. Thanks.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, yeah. I also have a animal related thing. This week, our cat Harold, who was an incredible personality, died suddenly just sitting in Bernetta's lap. It was the best death I've ever, well, either of us have ever experienced. He was fine one minute and the next minute he was dead. And he was just the best cat we've ever had, and we've had a lot. So we really miss his presence here, but we're really thankful that he didn't suffer. And we're thankful that we've been able to spend a lot more time the past 6 months with our animals. They've been just such a joy to be around. That's it.
All right, again, looking for hands of anyone else that wants to share. Oh, Beth, I see you.
I have a joy. I got together with a group of 5 other women yesterday in inside in a huge garage, former garage, with doors open and masks on and blankets around us. And we were celebrating a birthday and also marking the passing of my friend's 101-year-old mother. I laughed, we cried, we sang, we joked, and it was so nurturing for me to be with people inside, sitting down, enjoying one another. I was just filled up, and I realized what I missed so much during this COVID season. This is wonderful, but it's not the same, as we all know. But to be relaxed, sitting together safely was amazing. And I recognized how much I miss community and connection at a personal level that's warm and comfortable and not on a walk. So I light a candle in gratitude.
Great. Any other hands? I'm noticing some chat activity going on, so remember that that's an option if you don't feel comfortable sharing out loud. All right, in that case, I suppose I will pass it back to Mary. And Mary, you'll want to unmute yourself.
Is that, oh, there we go.
You're good.
Okay, we recognize these and unspoken joys and concerns with the song, There Is a Love. Nathan? As members of this community, we commit to contributing our time, energy, skills, and financial assets as we participate in the mission, goals, and ministry of this fellowship. Together, we commit to building a strong foundation to the future of our fellowship. One Sunday a month, 100% of our offering goes to a nonprofit of our choice. Today's offering supports this fellowship, our beloved community of people learning together to make love real. You can consult our webpage if you would like further information. Beth will lead us in singing We Give Thanks.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here, those far away, for the time we share with loving care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
Thank you, Beth. Please welcome back one of our favorite speakers, Reverend Amanda Aikman. She is a retired Unitarian Universalist minister who has served churches in the Pacific Northwest since 1994. She is a playwright and spiritual director and the author of a book on joyfulness. At the moment, she is starting to write a novel and, like all of us, trying to be hopeful about the world.
When I was a new minister back in the 80s, no, back in the 90s, when I was a new minister, I was often told that congregants wanted challenging intellectual sermons. Give us something with meat, they said. Teach us something about our Unitarian Universalist history, they said. But I rapidly found that the absolutely surest way to provoke cavernous yawns right off the bat was to take those folks at their word. I would start a sermon about the beginnings of Unitarianism in America with a date. In 1819, I would begin, and the yawns started immediately before the sentence was even finished. Take a good yawn right now if you like. I can't see you. But your team asked me to preach this month about William Ellery Channing, and I accepted because I haven't done one of these meaty historical sermons for ages. So Channing, he's a hero of our faith, and God knows we need heroes these days. So I'm going to do my best to breathe some life into him and to show that despite his being one of our greatest heroes, he also was very human and often very unheroic. So William Ellery Channing was a product of the New England elite. Born in 1780, he started attending Harvard at 15, as they did in those days, and was headed for the ministry. In those days, in New England, Calvinism, with its belief in predestination and the inability of humans to improve their fate, was the dominant faith. In fact, if you lived in New England, you had to pay a tax to support your local church, whether you attended or not. And there was no alternative. You were a Calvinist, a Congregationalist, pretty much whether you liked it or not. Along with the new nation, new theological ideas were quietly growing. As scientific knowledge advanced and as a self-made merchant class arose, the idea of human powerlessness was less and less persuasive. And in that hotbed of radical theological thought, Harvard, the heresy of Arminianism started to take hold. If you'd like to say it to yourself, it's really fun to say, Arminianism. Arminianism opposed the predestinarianism of Calvinism and claimed that human beings had free will and a say in their destiny. The liberals within the Calvinist church, influenced by the new biblical criticism coming from Germany and by the Unitarians of England, were no longer content to accept the doctrine of the Trinity, finding it irrational and, more importantly, unbiblical. Perhaps you, at some point in your life, have wrestled with the concept of the Trinity. I did for a very brief time and then gave up. So the liberals within Congregationalism believed that God was one. Also, they were increasingly reluctant to accept the idea that Christ was divine, seeing him as a special prophet, but fully human. And further, they absolutely did not believe that God predestined people to be saved or damned. In a very American manner, they believed in individuals' ability to save themselves through their own moral actions. All of these heresies bubbled away beneath the surface for a long time. calling someone a Unitarian, meaning one who did not believe in the Trinity, was one of the worst insults imaginable. So the Unitarians were closeted and quiet. I think today is coming out day, so maybe you could come out to somebody as a Unitarian today. So they shared their heretical views among themselves, but they never made an overt public stand to declare their beliefs. At last, two Orthodox theologians found evidence of the conspiracy to hide the liberals' heretical beliefs. And these two Orthodox theologians pushed and taunted the liberals. They reprinted passages of books that showed the liberals' agreement with the English Unitarians. And they suggested that anyone holding these radical beliefs should be excluded from Christian fellowship, in effect, calling them unworthy of the name Christian. The liberals, they said, were not only heretics, they were chickens. They were afraid to proclaim their beliefs. They were cowardly hypocrites. Now, I'm sure that most of us have been in this situation at one time or another. Have you ever sat quietly in a meeting or gathering where everyone around you was proclaiming a shared belief while you adamantly disagreed but were afraid to speak up? I am in a situation like that now. I hold a minority opinion about an extremely controversial issue, and I'm not going to say what it is because I, too, am a chicken. But by far the great majority of leaders and thinkers in our faith have declared that X is true. I happen to believe that Y is true. I'd much rather be part of the crowd and swap my unpopular belief for the currently popular one, but I can't. I am trying very hard to be invisible and inaudible on this matter. Every now and then I sense that someone else might share my view and I whisper to them, and I've found a few quiet allies this way. But I've seen the way that people who go public with their beliefs in opposition to X are savaged on social media, and especially by the ministers in our denomination. So I'm too intimidated to speak out. It's an awful feeling. Of all the virtues, moral courage has always been the one I most admire, and here I am being a moral coward. Perhaps you can relate to this when you have held a highly unpopular and controversial view. The sweat at your hairline, the queasy feeling in your stomach when the subject comes up, the self-loathing when you admit to yourself that you are afraid to speak your truth. So I imagine that William Ellery Channing, this slightly built, rather in his own words, effeminate son of the elite, who steered away from controversy whenever possible, I imagine that he felt many of these same sensations when he knew that the Unitarian movement needed a spokesman, needed someone to be brave and vocal, probably queasy in the stomach, probably a little sweaty. Channing did not want to be a leader. He hated conflict. Like the other liberal ministers, he tried to keep a low profile and shy away from the taunts and challenges the Orthodox ministers were issuing through increasingly hostile pamphlets. Pamphlets, quickly printed and circulated little booklets, were the way that people expounded their ideas and shared their ideas in those days. Channing did not want to lead a movement or create a new denomination, but finally he couldn't stay quiet anymore. His unbeatable eloquence and his iron conviction of the truth of what he frankly called Unitarian Christianity thrust him into the spotlight against his own preferences. In 1819, Channing was set to deliver the ordination sermon of his protege, Jared Sparks, in Baltimore. There was no longer any avoiding it. This was his moment, his chance, his time to express the ideas of the Unitarian movement outside of Boston. If successful, the sermon would bring nationwide attention to the ideas of liberal Christianity. On that day in May 1819, Channing would stop avoiding the heretical term Unitarian. He would embrace it and present it as a positive term. Channing was going to make up for his reluctance to take on the Orthodox establishment by now setting forth positions that were bold and clear. Though it wore a velvet glove, there was an iron hand underneath. Here is a very brief excerpt from this 90-minute sermon. I imagine Channing taking deep breaths to relax himself before stepping out to preach this sermon, and these words would still be controversial today in many places in our nation. We believe that there is one God and one only. We object to the doctrine of the Trinity. We protest against the irrational and unscriptural doctrine of the Trinity. We challenge our opponents to point out one passage in the New Testament where the word God means three persons. We believe that God is infinitely good, kind, benevolent, good in disposition as well as in act, good not to a few but to all, good to every individual as well as to the general system. So there you go, right up against Calvinism. Trinity is false. God is always good. So this sermon, boldly called Unitarian Christianity, instantly became the most controversial sermon ever preached in America. In print, it became a runaway bestseller, stamping Channing as a prophet of a new spirit of freedom and reason in religion. Eventually, Unitarian Christianity became the most famous and widely read and translated sermon ever preached in America, rivaled only by Ralph Waldo Emerson's Divinity School address. If you care to read it yourself, I think you'll find it to be beautifully written and reasoned, a masterpiece, in fact. And so Channing, the reluctant radical, became the standard bearer of the new faith. 5 years later, this new faith would be formalized as the American Unitarian Association, the AUA, the American Unitarian Association. And Channing would be asked to serve as its first president. Although he refused, his eloquence in expressing Unitarian ideas made him the informal intellectual leader of this new movement. Buoyed up on a wave of popularity and with the solid support of his growing congregation at the prestigious Federal Street Church in Boston, Channing swiftly became involved in all kinds of social justice movements. But the most challenging social issue of the century would prove to be a stumbling block for him, another reason to be reluctant. Slavery has often been called America's original sin. Yet white American Unitarians, like most white Americans, were slow to speak out against slavery as an immoral institution, and Channing was no exception. In his youth, Channing had been exposed to the institution of slavery while he worked as a tutor for a slave-owning family in Virginia. What he saw sickened him. It also led him to conclude that slaveholders were as much damaged by the institution as the slaves were. He was slow to speak out against slavery. His position among the Boston elite and the marginalization he knew he would face if he spoke out led him to proceed cautiously. In 1825, when he finally began to put forth an anti-slavery position, he made it clear that while he was against slavery, he was also opposed to the radical rhetoric of the abolitionists. Can't we see the exact same conflict being worked out in our country today, our public discourse? Sure, protest racism. Oh, not like that. That's too radical. Because the Federal Street Church membership included many of Boston's most powerful industrialists who did not approve of Channing's anti-slavery position, Channing, for the most part, did not speak publicly on the matter. But private conversations with two of his close friends who were abolitionists and a lot of soul searching caused him to change his course. In 1835, Channing published his book, Slavery, and began to advocate publicly for the gradual abolition of slavery. His book affirmed the human rights of slaves and argued that slaves have the same rational nature and the same power of conscience as those who are not enslaved. Slavery was a sin against God, in Channing's view. Well, this view met strong disapproval from the powerful Bostonians in Channing's congregation. The matter came to a head in 1840 when the famous abolitionist Charles Follen, a close friend of Channing's, died in an accident at sea. Channing preached a powerful sermon following Follen's death and was then asked by the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society if a memorial service for Follen could be held at Channing's church. When the congregation's standing committee, its board of trustees, rejected Channing's request to hold the abolitionist memorial service at Federal Street Church, Channing essentially resigned as the congregation's minister after decades in that job. Although he and the congregation did not formally end the relationship, he relinquished his salary and ceased to act as their minister. He preached only once more to the congregation before his death in 1842. When I applied to Starr King School for the Ministry, our seminary in Berkeley, I traveled to California from my home in Virginia for my interviews. I was still wavering about my choice because I'd been accepted by the ministry program at another denomination and had not made up my mind. While in the Bay Area, I had some spare time to explore San Francisco and visited the DeYoung Museum in Golden Gate Park. Nathan? Yeah. To my great surprise, there was a portrait of Channing on display. This beautiful portrait by Gilbert Charles Stewart, painted in 1815. I stood in front of this portrait for at least 20 minutes. I felt as if I was communing with Channing. Should I come here if they accept me? I asked. Will it be worth it? Eventually, an answer seemed to come to me through his slight smile and compassionate eyes. The answer I heard to both my questions was a quiet yes. Our heroes tend to be the radicals, the people who made a bold, dramatic stand for justice, often sacrificing their livelihoods or even their lives for their beliefs. We can be very impatient and dismissive of the liberals, the people who move more slowly or appear to be cowardly. William Ellery Channing was not a radical, but he contributed to radical changes in the great issues of his day. Perhaps most of us are more like Channing than we'd like to admit. Let us not condemn ourselves when we see our own cowardice or reluctance. Self-condemnation makes us feel powerless and give up even trying to change things. Let us instead reflect on Channing's contributions and know that even the small, subtle changes we make do contribute to the transformation of the whole. Our votes, our postcards or lawn signs, our posts on social media, our conversations with our neighbors, perhaps insignificant in and of themselves, but they are all part of a great process of change. And we do not make them alone. With every small step we take toward creating justice, peace, and progress, we are accompanied by a great crowd of comrades and companions, inspired, held up, and supported by the spirit of life and love. May you be richly blessed. Amen.
Thanks so much, Amanda. I believe we have enough time to go into breakout rooms now, so I'm going to set us up for that really quickly. The question for our breakout group, though, sorry, I'm reading on my other screen. Here we go. Amanda described her feelings in a group where she was afraid to speak her truth aloud. Has this ever happened to you? Can you tell the group a little about it and how it felt? So ruminate on that question, and let me create the rooms really quick. All right. Sweet. Okay. I will see you all in about 7 minutes. Hi, Anne.
I'm here.
Hello.
Hello.
Everyone else is in breakout rooms right now talking about the sermon.
Oh, I wish I could have heard it.
Well, we recorded it, and we should be able to send it out eventually. I'm not sure where it's recording to. It says the cloud, but we haven't done
Yeah.
that yet. So
Well, when the time comes, I'd like it. I always enjoy Adrian.
yeah, absolutely. I will make sure that we make that available. But yeah, feel
Thank you.
free to hang out. You're welcome to. Would you like me to put you in a room to join?
Um, sure.
Okay, let's get you. I see a good one. All right, I'll see you in a little bit.
Thanks, Nathan.
Hmm. Mm.
Good to see you, Nathan.
Okay. Our closing hymn today is number, you ready? Yeah, our closing hymn today is number 108. How can I keep from singing? Our closing words are from women's rights activist Elizabeth Cady Stanton. The moment we begin to fear the opinions of others and hesitate to tell the truth that is in us, and from motives of policy are silent when we should speak, the divine floods of light and life no longer flow into our souls. Michael? Yeah,
So now I will extinguish the chalice and ring the bell.
wonderful reverberation. Thank you, Beth. Now that the formal part of the service is over, we will continue with announcements regarding programs sponsored by the fellowship. If you have an announcement about an activity sponsored by the fellowship, please raise your hand to be recognized by the host, Nathan. If you have something else of interest to the fellowship, you may post it on our Facebook page or send it to our administrator to be included in the weekly newsletter. So Nathan's now going to recognize people who have fellowship-related announcements.